What is free software? Free software is software that respects the user's freedom. When people offer you software to the public, typically it's proprietary software. It's distributed in a way that keeps the users divided and helpless. Users are divided because each one is forbidden to share with anybody. And the users are helpless because you don't get the source code, the plans for the program. Nobody does. So nobody can change it. Nobody can even tell what the program is really doing. Free software is different. Free software respects your freedom. There are 4 specific essential freedoms that every software user should have. Freedom 0 is the freedom to run the program as you see fit. Freedom 1 is the freedom to help yourself. This is the freedom to study the source code of the program and then change it to do what you want. Freedom 2 is the freedom to help your neighbor. This is the freedom to make copies and distribute them to others. And freedom 3 is the freedom to help build your community. This is the freedom to publish a modified version of the program so others get the benefit of your contribution. All of these freedoms are essential so that users can have control of their own computers and so that users can make a community or make communities, and in these communities jointly take control of their own computers. But these freedoms should not be strange to you, because if we look at another kind of functional, practical work, recipes, you'll see that people who cook have enjoyed these same freedoms for a long time. There's the freedom to use the recipe as you wish, whenever you wish. Then there's freedom, that's freedom 0. Then freedom 1 is the freedom to study the recipe, see what ingredients it uses, make sure there's nothing that your friends are allergic to, and the freedom to change it as you wish. It's normal for cooks to change recipes, making small changes or big changes depending on their skill. And then there's freedom 2, the freedom to copy the recipe and hand copies to your friends. And then there's freedom 3, the freedom to publish a modified version. If you cook your modified version of a recipe for dinner with your friends, and then a friend says, "Hey, that was great, could I have the recipe?" You're free to write down your version of the recipe and share it with your friends. All these same freedoms are what we say the users of software should have also. Imagine the anger there would be if one day the government says, from now on, if you change or share a recipe, you're a pirate and we'll put you in prison because the owners of recipes are important and you're not. Imagine the anger there would be. They hardly would dare do that, not even now. But they did dare do that with software because the users of software were not so numerous, not so organized, and the developers of software were very organized. When I was thinking about these issues in the early 80s, proprietary, non-free software had become the norm. It was impossible to get a modern computer and use it without a non-free proprietary operating system. And in order to get an authorized copy of this proprietary operating system, you had to sign a contract promising you would not share with anyone. In other words, you had to betray the whole world. And this was considered normal, and even nastier. When you did sign this contract, what you would get would be executable programs. An executable program is just a bunch of numbers that hardly make any sense to anyone. Even programmers can't read them. And the source code, the mathematical form of the program, which programmers can understand, they would never let you have that at all. So the users had been made completely divided and helpless. And so the free software movement had to start from zero. We began by setting out to develop a free software operating system. You see, the operating system is the first thing you need when you run a computer. The computer won't do anything if you don't have an operating system in it. With an operating system, if it's a fairly complete operating system, You can do things like exchange email, browse the web, write files, print them, publish, write software and develop and test it, and various other things. So the crucial thing to make it possible to use software and freedom was to have an operating system that respects your freedom. So that's the project I launched. I announced it in September 1983, and in January 1984 I quit my job at MIT to start developing of the operating system GNU, G-N-U. Now the name GNU is a joke, and that's part of the whole purpose of these things. See, in the community of programmers who shared software that I was in the 1970s, having fun was a large part of the spirit. So we would often pick funny or mischievous names for programs. That's half the fun of developing the program, imagining how amused the users will be by the name. So I picked an amusing name for this program, and there's no funnier word in the English language than GNU. And what's more, it's also a recursive acronym. The word GNU stands for GNU's Not Unix. You see, Unix was another operating system, a proprietary operating system that people could not ethically use. But I decided to follow the design of Unix in developing this system. I figured that if I made a system compatible with Unix, then Unix being popular, there were lots of people who knew how to use Unix. And if the GNU system were compatible with Unix, all of them could easily switch. And this would give this operating system a somewhat easier start. It wouldn't have to work against the barrier that people had already learned to use Unix, and they didn't want to have to change. So during the 1980s, I and other people got together, and more and more people got involved as we wrote piece after piece of the GNU system. By 1992, we had almost all the essential pieces, but one important piece was still missing. This is the so-called kernel, the program that divides the machine's resources up among all the other programs that you run and keeps them from getting in each other's way so that they can all run side by side. And at this point, a college student in Finland, Linus Torvalds, developed a kernel and called it Linux. He actually wrote it during 1991 and got it barely working. And then in 1992, he changed the license and made it free software. The first initial license for Linux was a bit too restrictive. It didn't give people entirely freedom 2 and 3. But then he changed to another license that did. He used the GNU General Public License, or GNU GPL for short, which I had developed to use for the various components we were writing for GNU. So at that point, by combining Linux and the various pieces of GNU, people made a complete free operating system. And for the first time, it was possible to use a personal computer without giving up your freedom. Of course, since then, this GNU plus Linux operating system has become increasingly popular, and you read articles about it in mainstream newspapers. But most people today don't mention that this system is the result of a many-year campaign for freedom, a campaign that is still going on. We are still organizing thousands of people to improve GNU software and add new packages to do new jobs. Whenever there's an important job that isn't done by free software, we look for people to do it, because you should be able to do absolutely everything with your computer without giving up your freedom. People should never find themselves faced with a choice between doing a certain job that may seem very important to them and keeping their freedom. So we've got to develop free software for every purpose. If you're a programmer, I hope you'll join in helping us do this. But if you're not a programmer, you can help the free software movement in other ways that are even more important. You see, now that we've established our ability to develop a wide spectrum of software, there are over 3,500 different free software packages listed in our free software directory, which you can find in www.gnu.org/directory. Now that there's no longer a doubt about whether we can develop a broad range of software. The question is not whether we can do it, the question is whether they will let us do it. Increasingly, governments are adopting laws that prohibit various kinds of free software. For instance, the European Union has adopted vicious forms of copyright law that prohibit free software for some important jobs. The courts have yet to interpret these laws, but similar laws in the US have been used, for instance, to prohibit the free software to watch a movie on a DVD. This program, which was developed by people in Europe, has been driven underground in the US, and we're afraid it'll be driven underground in Europe now too. They're trying to abolish peer-to-peer file sharing software. This law in the US was recently interpreted to prohibit additional free software. There was a proprietary game program and a special network server that people could connect to so that they could play against each other. People figured out the protocol and provided an alternate server that people could use instead to fight against each other with this game. And people also developed a free replacement for the game. And you can use either of these two free replacements, or you can use the original proprietary program and the original server. They can all talk to each other. But the company that made the first game and the server have used this law to shut down the alternative server. And please note, people who are using the alternative server with the proprietary game, they presumably bought that proprietary game. I think that's immoral, but they shouldn't be restricting you. It's okay to sell copies, but they shouldn't be putting restrictions on you, so that proprietary game is not legitimate. However, it's a fact that people who use it with the server, well, they could have just used it to play by themselves or with the other server. It's the same game. There's no reason to think that they've copied that game. And the people who might use the proprietary server with the free game, well, they've got to pay for an account on the server if they want to use it. So these people are presumably paying for whatever they got, and they've still been forbidden to do it. So these laws are extremely dangerous, and they're not the only ones. Patent law is now in some countries being applied to software ideas. In the US, any idea for something a program might do can be patented. And the European Patent Office decided to ignore the treaty that set it up and start issuing similar patents. You may have seen a progress bar on some of your software. It starts at 0 and goes over gradually to 100 to tell you how much of the job has been done. Well, that's one patented idea. The European Patent Office issued a patent for that. The European Patent Office has issued some 35,000 different software idea patents. Whether they have any validity is uncertain, since the treaty said the European Patent Office wasn't supposed to do this. But a directive is being pushed right now that will either authorize or forbid software idea patents. The European Commission wrote this directive to allow software idea patents, but they did it in a rather hidden way. They used words whose meaning is very flexible. And then they said that these words, the patent has to have a technical character. Well, what does it mean to have a technical character? They said it means it has to be a specific physical process. But these words can be stretched easily. In fact, the European Patent Office says that the progress bar is a specific physical effect. After all, there are these dots on your screen that change from one color to another. That's a physical effect. They think that's enough excuse to issue a patent. And so you can see that the words that were chosen by the European Commission were designed to allow patenting of software ideas. The European Parliament rejected that 1 year ago. A broad coalition of free software developers and other software developers convinced the Parliament. Oh, and economists joined in too. They think software idea patents are a completely stupid policy. Well, now the Council of Ministers is trying to reverse that. But you can get involved in stopping this. A couple of months ago, we convinced the Netherlands to change their vote in the Council of Ministers. They had voted in favor of software idea patents, but the Netherlands Parliament wouldn't stand for that. They actually adopted a resolution telling their minister to vote against. If we get one more sizable country, then the Parliament's vote will be sustained, and we will have achieved a directive that rejects software idea patents. But why should we be so scared of software idea patents? Every program that's substantial combines many ideas, perhaps hundreds or even thousands of ideas. For instance, if you look at the GNU plus Linux system, the kernel alone, Linux that is, has thousands of ideas in it. And in the United States, hundreds of them are patented. This year, someone did a study that must have been a tremendous amount of work. He looked at the code of Linux, just this one part of our system, and then he checked all the US software patents. And he found 286 different patents, each of which covers an idea that's implemented in some part of Linux, the kernel. Elsewhere, I've seen an estimate that Linux is 0.25% of the entire GNU/Linux system. In other words, I'm making it too big when I draw it with my hands. It's 1/400th. So if we multiply that number by 400, we get an estimate of around 100,000 different software idea patents that might cover ideas found somewhere in the system. It's almost impossible to continue when there are so many different monopoly prohibitions applying to your work. How can anyone develop software? How can anyone combine thousands of ideas when each one of them might be prohibited? So if we want software at all to continue outside the megacorporations have ways to escape from these problems. The rest of us can't. If we want software to continue outside the dominion of the megacorporations, we've got to reject software idea patents. So I suggest that you look at the site softwarepatents.co.uk to get an introduction to this problem, and then take a look at ffii.org. FFII is the leader of the fight against software idea patents in Europe and has done a tremendous job. We're close to winning, but victory is not assured. We need your help, and we need it right now.